my name is Liberty. Welcome to or welcome back to my channel. This video is 10 digital art tips I would tell beginners. Number 1. Get comfortable with your mediums. Mediums are the materials used to create your art. So if you're a digital artist like me, that would be getting used to the app that you're using. To beginner digital artists, trying out new apps can be a little intimidating because there are always so many options and different things to do within the app that can look kind of overwhelming. After you've learned the basics, try a few practice drawings. Doing practice drawings can help you get a better feel for the app and your digital art pen if you use one. Also, if you're not used to using a digital art pen, most apps have settings for your pen. So if it doesn't feel right, look at the settings and play around with it. Number 2. A big canvas. When drawing digitally, sometimes the small details are very pixelated. To avoid having low quality art, go into your canvas and make the pixel ratio higher. Typically all of my canvases on each side are about 2000 pixels on each side. The bigger your canvas is, the more smooth and crisp your drawing will look. It will be so much easier to include smaller details. Number 3. Layers. They make a lot of things easier, so do not ignore them. To beginner artists, the meaning of layers aren't usually understood and can be a bit daunting with all the different effects you can do to each layer. When I'm drawing, I usually break it down into different parts so I don't have a million layers at one time. I start with a sketch, and after I'm done with my concept, I turn the opacity down on that layer and I add a layer on top. In the layer on top is where I can start to make the clean version of my sketch without them touching. After I cleaned up my line art, I can just turn off my sketch layer or delete it. Keeping everything separate can make it easier, but it also can take a long time to get used to. With coloring, it is basically the same thing, but instead you add layers underneath your line art, and that's where I start with my base colors. All of the colors I use in drawings are usually all on separate layers, so it's easier to render and shade them later on. It also depends on your art style, because I know of some people who like to draw on one layer to give it that painting effect. Number 4. Try different brushes. Part of finding your own art style is figuring out what your favorite brushes are. Different brushes highly impact the way your drawing will look, and using multiple can help add more texture. I mentioned the settings for your pen earlier, which basically just consists of how your brush will function at the touch of your pen. Something I would like to mention is I started off on IBIS Paint when I first came to digital art, but for the past almost 2 years I've been on Procreate. The main brush I usually use on Procreate is Studio Pen, but I use a lot of different varieties in their brushes. Number 5. Use the tools given. There are all kinds of different mechanics in digital art apps. Learning how to use them will make it so much easier. Whether it be adding blur to your art or using the lasso tool for moving and coloring one specific part. One of the most helpful tools in my opinion is Liquify. By using Liquify, you can push and adjust your art to fix proportions and anything else that might look off to you. Another tool I like to use all the time is changing my layer mode. When adding shading, I will clip a layer on top of the flat color and select Multiply. Selecting Multiply for shadows will make that layer darker. I usually just change the opacity and do whatever else I need to make it look natural. For lighting or highlights, I will use Add, and if I want a glowing effect, I blur it. Number 6. Study. Depending on what you're going to be drawing, it is very important to study, especially as a beginner. Learning something new and implementing it into your art is one of the best ways to adapt your skills. For me, I'd mostly draw people, so if that's the main thing that you want to get better at, look at photos of people and pay attention to the placements of their features. Breaking down the anatomy into basic shapes will help you get a better understanding of how a face or body should look. If you are more into items or landscapes, start by studying perspective, and remember that making everything look 3D will make your art look a little bit more impactful. Number 7. Flip your canvas. When working on art for a long amount of time without breaks, your brain tends to not pick up mistakes because you've been looking at it for so long. But by flipping your canvas, you can see the uneven areas. This is usually when I use Liquify the most. Then, when everything looks more natural, flip the canvas again and go from there. Number 8. Line art. Line art isn't always needed. Sometimes with people's art styles, they want their art to look a little bit more rough, so they just clean up their sketch, instead of making a new layer to make a clean version of what they already have. Some of the things I've learned to make line art more interesting is filling corners. What I mean by filling corners is just by adding a little bit more line art to thicken each touching line. I don't do this all the time because it tends to get tedious. It takes a while, but I do it from time to time. Something that I do in every drawing is after I'm done coloring my art, I will go to the line art layer and alpha lock it. Alpha locking a layer means that you can only draw on what is on that layer. Selecting the color of the clothes or body and making it a little darker, then filling that section of the line art with that color makes the drawing look more natural and soft. Number 9. don't rush it. Something I used to struggle with when drawing was rushing through significant details because I wanted to finish the art. Not taking my time resulted in less detail and messy, quickly made backgrounds, bad shading of the clothes, and I forgot to check if I missed anything. If you take your time, you will not only enjoy the process more, but it will also allow you to add more detail into your drawing. Number 10. Practice. I know you've probably heard it a million times, but the only way you can actually grow your skills is by practicing. In my last video, I showed how my art has changed so much over the past couple years. A good way to start practicing is just drawing what you want to draw. I would highly recommend drawing every day or every other day. For me, when I did that consistently, I had a lot of results in a couple months. But also, if you don't feel like drawing that day, give yourself a little break. Pushing yourself too much can make art less fun, and it might change your perspective to look at it in a negative way. Don't give up even if you're unhappy with your art. Another thing I mentioned in my last video was how much I used to hate my art, but I practiced and got over a lot of things that I used to struggle with. But I still struggle with plenty of things, and I'm still learning, but I'm very happy with my progress. I think that wraps it up for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you stayed this long, please leave a comment. I love to read them. And if you want to learn more about my digital art journey, go check out my last video. Follow my Instagram for behind the scenes, updates, or photos of my cat. And I will see you next month with a new video. God bless. Bye!